For some comedians, Saturday Night Live represents the biggest thing they'll ever do in show business. For whatever reason, their success on late-night comedy TV never quite transferred to other aspects of the entertainment industry, and they never quite caught that big Hollywood break. While appearing on Saturday Night Live, Jan Hooks seemed to do absolutely everything required of a future comedy superstar. Her inspired Betty Davis impersonation is legendary in its own right.
You wrote a nasty, tell-all book, and I want you to have a bad life!
She played several recurring characters that instantly endeared her to audiences, including her iconic portrayal of Candy Sweeney of the Sweeney Sisters nightclub act. After leaving SNL in 1991, Jan Hooks never quite landed a role that showcased her immense talents. She briefly joined the cast of Designing Women that same year, replacing Jean Smart. Unfortunately, that show was on its last legs, and it simply couldn't survive such enormous cast changes. Designing Women ultimately went off the air in 1993. She had funny recurring roles on Third Rock from the Sun and 30 Rock, and she memorably voiced Apu's wife, Manjula, on The Simpsons. Still, Hooks didn't find nearly as many projects as she deserved. When Hooks unexpectedly passed away in 2014 at the age of 57, several SNL legends paid homage to the comedian. Former castmate Kevin Nealon tweeted, "My girlfriend in the 80s and my friend forever. Janners, God, you were talented. Too soon and too sad." Producer Lorne Michaels let go of most of the long-standing SNL cast members in 1995, bringing in a new slate of performers that included Will Ferrell, Molly Shannon, and Darrell Hammond. On a show that often includes impersonations of celebrities and political figures, it's important for SNL to always have a man of a thousand voices in the mix. From 1995 to 2009, Hammond was that man. A remarkably skilled impressionist, he's probably the best mimic the show has ever seen. He took a nuanced, realistic approach, consistently turning in remarkable impersonations of Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and Sean Connery.
Sean Connery, just pick a category.
I'll take horse semen for 800.
The fact that Hammond disappeared so thoroughly into his characters may go some way in explaining why he never quite got the attention he deserved, even after 14 years in the cast. He scored a few bit parts in movies like Scary Movie 3 and landed recurring roles on a few TV shows like Damages, but he's never been cast in any particularly monumental roles. In 2014, Hammond rejoined the SNL family as its announcer, taking over for the deceased Don Pardo. Any SNL highlight reel that covers the early 80s tends to focus on Eddie Murphy's work in classic sketches like Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood. But castmate Joe Piscopo was almost as big of a star, a fact that's often obscured by Murphy's tremendous post-SNL success. Piscopo performed a wide range of well-done impressions on SNL, including Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, and most famously, Frank Sinatra. In fact, Murphy and Piscopo teamed up for a classic sketch parodying the 1982 song Ebony and Ivory, with Murphy playing Stevie Wonder and Piscopo playing Sinatra.
Yeah, I'm very much into that tune you do with the Beatle kid. What's his name? The one that looks like a broad?
Piscopo and Murphy appeared on screen together a lot. In fact, Piscopo played Pokey to Murphy's Gumby, but then in 1984, Piscopo left SNL. That same year, he starred in Johnny Dangerously, a send-up of 1930s gangster movies.
You shouldn't grab me, Johnny. My mother grabbed me once. Once.
Piscopo was well-suited to playing tough guys like Danny Verman, but the film flopped at the box office. In fact, it was trounced on its opening weekend by Eddie Murphy's Beverly Hills Cop. Piscopo's career turned into a string of small roles in TV shows, along with a few stand-up specials for cable TV, an extreme interest in bodybuilding, and in 2017, floating plans to run for governor of New Jersey. As we mentioned earlier, SNL cleaned house in the fall of 1995, bringing in a bunch of new performers to inject some energy into the aging comedy institution. Cheri Oteri, a veteran of the Los Angeles-based Groundlings comedy troupe, was among them. She brought that live theater dynamic to television with a collection of truly wild and zany characters.
You can take your coat off if you like. It's from the Burlington Coat Factory.
Who can forget her psychotically enthusiastic Spartan cheerleader Ariana?
Roll call! Cha-cha, boochie, cha-cha, boochie, roll call!
Or what about that no-nonsense Nadine?
Simmer down now.
Oteri was also celebrated for her brilliantly silly impersonations of Barbara Walters and Debbie Reynolds. She often appeared in sketches opposite formidable co-stars like Will Ferrell and Molly Shannon, but Oteri always held her own, to say the least. She was, without a doubt, one of SNL's brightest stars until she left the show in 2000. Later that year, she landed the major role of Gail Hailstorm in the hit Scream Send-Up Scary Movie. She went on to star in the unfortunate Dumb and Dumber prequel, Dumb and Dumberer, When Harry Met Lloyd. Since then, she's taken on several guest starring gigs and voice roles. Frankly, she deserves better. Plenty of SNL stars go big and broad to get a reaction from the audience, but Nora Dunn completely disappeared into her roles, much like a film actress. Between 1985 and 1990, Dunn stepped into several classic sketches, and she was never anything less than hilarious. You might remember her ridiculous turn as Leona Helmsley.
Right away, you'll notice the little things like real skeletons.
Or how about Babette, the ever-maudlin French prostitute?
I'm a woman. What, are you blind? Do I have to spell it out for you? Woman. W-O-O-O-O-M-A-N, woman.
But Dunn's most famous SNL contribution may have been controversy. She publicly boycotted the second-to-last episode of the 1989-90 season, hosted by comedian Andrew Dice Clay, because she found his material homophobic and abusive to women. In a 1990 interview with Larry King, Clay basically accused her of doing it all for publicity.
You're saying that's for effect they're doing it because they should understand it's an act?
I mean, a great example is Nora Dunn.
More likely, she was simply offended by his act. Since leaving the show, Dunn has landed a lot of character-driven work, making appearances in shows like Grace and Frankie and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. But with such boundless talent, she deserves a few plum roles that she can really sink her teeth into. Ellen Cleghorne was a vital part of the Saturday Night Live cast of the early 90s, playing a long line of memorable characters like Queen Shaniqua.
Kwanzaa is a Swahili word and it means Santa don't come to my house.
Cleghorne left the show of her own volition in 1995, when the WB gave the comic performer her very own sitcom called Cleghorne, but it was canceled after just one season. As far as film work is concerned, Adam Sandler did cast her in a supporting role in Grown Ups 2. Still, she's got a lot going on. After going back to school and earning a PhD in performance studies at New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, you should now refer to her as Dr. Ellen Cleghorne. So there. Garrett Morris made television history in 1975 as one of the original Saturday Night Live cast members, or as the group of relative unknowns was collectively known, the not ready for primetime players. Starring on the envelope-pushing series brought fame and fortune to almost everyone in the original cast, so why not Garrett Morris? During SNL's early years, Morris stood out for his wild and crazy characters. There was, of course, the Weekend Update translator for the hard of hearing, a bit that never gets old.
President Ford is finally over that stubborn weak-long cold.
And fun fact, Morris became the first actor to ever play Ant-Man on screen. Indeed, he portrays the character in the SNL sketch called Superhero Party.
You don't remember me? We met several times. It's Ant-Man.
Well, that certainly explains Morris's cameo in Ant-Man, doesn't it?
What the hell?
While former castmates like Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd dominated film comedy in the 80s, Morris found the occasional role and appeared in some rather middling fare. He had a brief cameo in the comedy How to Beat the High Cost of Living, which co-starred fellow SNL alum Jane Curtin. At the age of 74, he was cast as diner cashier Earl on the long-running Two Broke Girls, so there's that. Paul Brittain was 33 when he joined Saturday Night Live in 2010. He quickly made a name for himself thanks to some oddball and totally original characters. Why, here comes Lord Cecil Windermere, an immature, old-timey aristocrat who dances around to harpsichord music and clearly possesses a pronounced sweet tooth.
This is Cecil.
I want sweets!
What?
Don't let his opulent fineries fool you. He's not so different from you and I.
You just need some attention, didn't you?
Yeah.
I want to hold him.
And anyone remember this character?
Croatian import, Goran Funky Boy Bogdan.
I go to your Sonic restaurant, I order a plate of Dobrozeki. They tell me the washroom is that way.
During the 2011-12 season, SNL's Lorne Michaels put Brittain on a half-season contract and opted not to renew it, making for an abrupt mid-season disappearance. Since then, Brittain has racked up scarcely more than a dozen credits, all of them small character parts, probably his most prominent work came in Killing Gunther, an indie comedy written and directed by his old SNL pal Taran Killam. Jerry Minor has been a part of numerous innovative comedy projects and worked with plenty of comic visionaries both before and after his too-short tenure on SNL, which only lasted through the 2000-2001 season.
Hey! Hey!
What is it, Mr. Tarkanian?
Oh, thank you. That's exactly the response I'm looking for.
However, such comedies lean more towards the cult classic column than smash hits. Prior to SNL, Minor co-starred on David Cross and Bob Odenkirk's edgy and influential sketch comedy series Mr. Show. He was also a correspondent on The Daily Show, albeit briefly. Following SNL, Minor starred on the Comedy Central debate parody Crossballs and had a recurring role as Officer Carter on Arrested Development. He also played an overburdened dad on ABC's short-lived Carpoolers. Most recently, Minor popped up on Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt as an inept prosecutor named Chris, who just might be based on O.J. Simpson prosecutor Christopher Darden. In 1982, Eddie Murphy hosted SNL while still in the cast, filling in for his sick 48 Hours co-star Nick Nolte. He also changed the show's famous cold open proclamation, changing it to "Live from New York, it's the Eddie Murphy Show." And SNL in the early 80s was indeed the Eddie Murphy Show. In fact, the comedy dynamo overshadowed the solid work of many other cast members, including Tim Kazurinsky.
You're erroneous, Sons. Guy can't even spell.
Here he's interviewing Richard Nixon, played by Joe Piscopo beneath several pounds of makeup.
Well, now that you're at the end of your life, how does it feel to be the most vilified man in the country?
Sensational. I love it.
After leaving SNL in 1984, Kazurinsky hit Hollywood, which, in the mid-80s, needed guys like him to play nerds and dweebs. Case in point, he portrayed Carl Sweetchuck in 3 Police Academy sequels.
If you don't like it, you go around me.
Also an SNL writer, Kazurinsky went on to write scripts for movies and TV, co-writing the 1986 romantic dramedy About Last Night, the 1988 film For Keeps, and writing an episode of According to Jim. Laura Kightlinger was a force to be reckoned with on the stand-up comedy circuit in the 90s, and her self-deprecating wit instantly won her over with audiences. She eventually landed on Saturday Night Live as a double threat, working as both a writer and a performer during the 1994-1995 season.
I bet this has some kind of happy ending, huh?
No, Norm, it doesn't.
Indeed, the SNL cast was so overstuffed, she reportedly struggled to get her material and her face on the air. After her brief stint with late-night comedy, Kightlinger returned to stand-up and launched a bunch of small film and TV roles. In 2006, she emerged with gigs on 2 prominent shows, HBO's Lucky Louie and IFC's The Minor Accomplishments of Jackie Woodman. Kightlinger created the latter, a semi-autobiographical tale of a self-destructed struggling screenwriter. Kightlinger still acts on occasion. Here she is in a recent episode of Pen 15.
We don't have much time before the show, but as you know, something of Heather's was stolen. A thong.
These days, she's mainly focusing her attention elsewhere. She's a successful writer and producer who's worked on Will and Grace, a show she's also appeared in on occasion. Surely, all these accomplishments take some of the sting out of her less than legendary SNL stint.
Well, maybe marriage is in my future.
Well, I certainly envy the lucky guy that winds up with you there, Laura.
You do, Norm?
Yeah.
Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite shows are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.